On February 20th, 2014, Ashton noticed a DUI checkpoint on Dupree and King Arthur Drive in Woodstock, Georgia. Ashton drove into the checkpoint and was flagged down for inspection by 2 unidentified officers while open carrying.
Howdy.
How's it going?
Going good. About yourself?
Oh, you went down there, bud.
I'm comfortable right there.
Do what?
I'm comfortable with it right there.
You comfortable with it right there?
Yes, sir.
Let me see your driver's license. Open the door, dude. If you want these back, you can roll that window down for me.
What'd you say, sir? Sorry. What did you say?
Because he can't hardly hear you, that's why. If you roll the window down, we're just out looking for drunks, man. We're not here to hurt you or whatever.
That's fine.
Okay. Pull over on that side there just a minute.
I'm going to check the vehicle, make sure.
For what reason do you have to detain me to pull me over into secondary, sir?
Pull over on the side so we can do a vehicle inspection right over
For
there.
what reason? Have you suspected me of committing a crime?
Do what, buddy?
Have you suspected me of committing a crime?
Currently, 11 states have banned DUI checkpoints because they are considered to be unconstitutional, as they are in fact an egregious violation of the Fourth Amendment that uses fear to circumnavigate unlawful searches and seizures. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court ruled in Michigan State Police v. Sitz that these checkpoints are constitutional as long as they serve a specific government interest, are minimally intrusive, and follow specific guidelines. Nobody wants intoxicated drivers on the road, and many will argue that they would prefer these checkpoints exist. However, including that the checkpoints can be intrusive at all is complete hypocrisy. Stopping every car on the road might make it easier to prevent the very few drunk drivers that are actually caught, but that is an insufficient justification for banning the requirement of individualized suspicion. The jurisdictions that allow sobriety checkpoints often carve out specific exemptions to their normal civil protections in order to allow sobriety checkpoints. So what's the point of having civil protections if the state can disregard them at will? One of the troopers has attempted to gain unlawful entry into Ashton's vehicle, and because Ashton didn't fall in line and obey, and after noticing his camera, he is ordered to the secondary inspection lane as the troopers look for anything they can find to bring unwarranted harm into Ashton's life.
Well, is there anything wrong with the car that we need to know about?
Not that I know of, sir.
Okay, alright.
Hold on, I'm going to check your tires. That thing, look real close for me.
They're looking what?
Almost illegal. They're almost too slick.
Almost illegal. Alright. Where would you like me to pull?
Do what?
Where would you like me to pull over?
Over behind that car.
Behind that one?
Yep. Real close, man.
So I'm being pulled into secondary because my tires might be illegal. That's interesting.
Everything correct on your license? You still live at the same address?
I do, sir.
All right, sit tight for me, okay?
Put in my car and park. This is Georgia State Patrol. For the record, they tried to open my door just because I wouldn't roll my window down all the way before asking for my license or anything. They're looking at my front right tire, apparently. So they said they were looking for drunks. Yes, sir. What does that mean? Yes, sir.
He wants to show you a tire out here, man. It's slick.
I'd prefer to not get out of my vehicle.
I think you need one, dude. I think you might just go and take one.
He wants to show you, dude, where it's slick out here. It's for your safety. That way you can see about getting you another tire. That's it.
Let me ask you something. Are you scared?
To get out of my vehicle? Yes, sir.
You are?
Yes, sir.
Why are you scared of the law?
I'm not scared of the law.
Where are you hiding from?
I'm not hiding from anything, sir.
Okay, well, why are you scared to get out?
Because I feel safer.
You scared of the dark?
Maybe.
Huh?
I might be.
Yeah, I believe you are. Grown man scared of the dark, that sounds kind of funny to me.
That sounds funny.
After a few moments, the troopers return with an attempt to bait Ashton out of the vehicle by stating that his tires are almost illegal, which would mean that they are legal, but Ashton politely refuses the request to view his possibly slick tires, and the trooper makes a few unprofessional remarks, perhaps to solicit a negative response by attacking Ashton's ego. It could be the only language the trooper speaks, and if Ashton wasn't more prepared for the officer's attempts to escalate, this encounter may have gone sideways rather quickly. Keep in mind that that in another questionable ruling by the Supreme Court, Pennsylvania v. Mims, an officer can order you out of your vehicle on a lawful traffic stop, and despite your convictions of how unconstitutional these checkpoints may be, if you are ordered to exit, you must. The troopers continued to look for reasons to hem Ashton up.
How about hit the blinkers for me? Turn your right blinker on.
Turn your right blinker on.
I have no need to turn my blinkers on right now. I have no need to turn my blinkers on right now.
He's doing a vehicle inspection. He wants to check your vehicle. Turn your right blinker on. Thank you. Now turn your left blinker on. Hit your brakes. Tap your brakes. Put your car in reverse to make sure your backup lights are working. Alright, put it back parked. He'll come around to the front. Check the front blinkers now.
Yes, sir. Note they're shining the light in the camera. Funny. Very entertaining. Very sad. I'm surprised my heart's not racing as much as I thought it would. I guess I've watched too many videos. I know what to expect. The first thing they said is they were looking for drunks. Still haven't been asked if I'd been drinking or not yet. Funny. Suddenly it doesn't seem to be that's what they're looking for.
I see this vehicle out on the road again.
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna stop you just because that tire on the right front.
Tire in the right front?
It's very close.
In what way? So I can change it?
Needs a tire replaced.
Tire replaced?
Yeah, you don't know Trooper Mike Freeman, do you?
Who?
Trooper Mike Freeman.
Not that I know of.
You don't know him? Remember him riding you for 84 and a 65?
Yes, sir.
On 575? See why he's scared to get out now.
No, he was very professional. I actually had a good encounter. Alright, so I guess I'm free to go. I should have asked for name and badge number, but they did the hand the license as he walked away kind of thing, so I was not able to do so.
After a final attempt to intimidate Ashton, he is set free without a citation or further incident. At no point during this supposed DUI checkpoint was he asked if he had been drinking. He was never asked to perform field sobriety tests or provide a chemical test either. It is likely that the troopers have a
This is an update, okay? Oklahoma governor has now commuted the death sentence of Mr. Julius Jones. Let's put up a picture of Mr. Jones. He was set to be executed today at 4 p.m. Central Time. Jones' sentence has been commuted to life in prison without the possibility of parole. That was recommended by a majority vote of the actual parole board. They said, okay, well, let's do the commutation thing, right? Jones has been on death row since he was 19. He has always maintained his innocence, and I do believe he's innocent. He's 41 years of age, spent more than half of his life in prison after he was charged and convicted of the murder of Paul Howell during a 1999 carjacking. Mr. Jones has maintained that he is innocent of the crime and was framed by his then friend and co-defendant, Christopher Jordan, who allegedly actually shot Mr. Howell. Two cellmates of Jones, co-defendant Christopher Jordan, have come forward claiming Jordan had admitted committing the crime to them. In one letter sent to Jones' legal team, one cellmate of Jordan wrote that he said, "My co-defendant is on death row behind a murder I committed." His family also provided an alibi for Jones. They've always provided this alibi. Our family knows that Julius did not commit this murder because Julius was at home with us at the time of the murder. His mother said in the news release in 2020, We were at home playing board games and eating spaghetti. The judge and jury that convicted and sentenced my son to die never heard that we were having a family game night. All right, the clemency petition says he's been on death row because of fundamental breakdowns in the system, tasked with deciding his guilt, including ineffective and inexperienced defense attorneys, racial bias among his jury, and alleged prosecutorial misconduct. Now, I want to remind you, we know today, and you can find this on the Innocence Project page, that we had jury members that called him the N-word. We had another jury member that said he needs to just be taken to the back of the courthouse and shot. These are the people that swore to be unbiased and judge the facts as they are. And then you had ineffective legal counsel and a black man in front of you, a recipe for injustice and the tragedy that has happened here. Senator Turner, what are your thoughts on this one?
Hey, that's it, Doc. You know, just got to say amen on that. It is unfortunate that when it comes to African Americans and then other people of color and then poor people by extension, there always seems to be a glitch in the matrix.
Yep, always.
There's a glitch in this matrix for sure, and it's been going on for generations. And we got to put a stop to this. This is wrong.
Yeah, and people say that we need to fix the criminal justice system. I always challenge that line of thinking. You actually need to break it, because the criminal justice system is doing exactly what it was designed
to do.
Right? Let's go to the McMichael Bryan trial, the people that killed Ahmaud Arbery, right? So Travis McMichael, who is the son of the father-son duo, decided to take the stand. Now, this was quite interesting because he was crying what has been deemed as white tears. These white tears are something magnificent, obviously. Kyle Rittenhouse cried white tears. You now have Travis McMichael crying white tears. And it's amazing to me that this is the commonality. Get on the stand and just make people feel bad, right? You know, when you are a defense attorney, sometimes you are talking to the jury of one, because you only need one to say, reasonable doubt. Now, that doesn't get you a not guilty, but it gets you a hung jury and you get to go home, okay? And then the prosecutor has to decide if they want to charge you again or not. Well, now Travis McMichael said, no, you got it all wrong. Ahmaud Arbery was a dangerous person. He was going to kill me. I was in fear for my life. Here's the testimony.
I shot him. Why? He had my gun. He struck me. It was obvious that he was. It was obvious that he was attacking me. That if he would have got the shotgun from me, then it was this is a life or death situation, and I'm going to have to stop him from doing this.
Yeah, I got more. Here's what happened under cross-examination from the prosecutor. Here it is.
And at this point in time, when you first see him on Burford, he's not reaching into his pockets.
No, ma'am. Not running, no, ma'am.
And he never yelled at you guys?
No, ma'am.
Never threatened you at all?
No, ma'am.
Never brandished any weapons?
Sorry, Your Honor, he's trying to finish his answer.
Yeah, he did not threaten me verbally, no, ma'am.
All right. Didn't brandish any weapons?
No, ma'am.
Didn't pull out any guns?
No, ma'am.
Didn't pull out any knife?
No, ma'am.
Never reached for anything, did he?
No.
He just ran?
Yes, he was just running.
Gives an idea of mens rea, the formulation of criminal intent, the thought process of the criminal act. Here's more.
She said, we've had a lot of trouble with thieves. It just worries me because my daddy is slap old crazy, LOL. He's old as dirt and doesn't care about jail. And you responded, that's what this world needs more of. My old man is the same way.
I did say that, yes, ma'am.
And then the next line is, you said, hell, I'm getting that way.
I did say that.
She said, have to make an example out of somebody. You said, that's right. Hope y'all catch the vermin, correct?
I did.
And ladies and gentlemen, this is why bias and racism, this is why it is deadly. Here's the next one.
You made contact with the shady-looking white guy under the Fancy Bluff Bridge while armed, correct?
I did, yes, ma'am.
And your father had his gun on him too, correct?
I believe he did. I would assume he did, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And did you brandish and show your weapons to the man?
I did not.
This was just some sort of pleasant conversation with the homeless guy under the bridge, is what you're telling this jury.
Yeah, it came pleasant. Once I split between him and the machete that he had there, and asked him what's going, how's he doing, what's going on. He stayed right where he was to continue to fish, and I didn't see a threat.
Let me make it very plain. The similarities in these cases, the McMichael Bryan case and the Kyle Rittenhouse case, you have white men who grab their weapons to go somewhere in order to use them. They ended up killing individuals who had no weapon and did not think that they would be killed just by being there. And then, after they commit the murders, there's ambiguity about if they should be charged with murder or not. People are scratching their heads. I mean, dead bodies, unarmed individuals, they have no lawful authority to do what they're doing. Still, the criminal justice system did not immediately swoop in and say, that's it, done deal, case closed, it's over for you. We had to fight to get to this point, okay? In the Glenn County case, the murderers of Ahmaud Arbery, it ran so deep that the DA ordered the cops not to arrest him. The DA has now been indicted for covering up a murder. Do you think this is the first time that DA covered up a murder? That DA has been in power for a long time down in the Glenn County circuit. You need to open the books on her, but she covered up a murder. She's been indicted for it. She's been indicted for it because of free press. People started looking into it. The GBI got involved. Senator Turner, they're taking a stand now saying, hey, we got it all wrong. They were actually the victims. Travis McMichael, the killer, says he was going to be killed. He had no choice. What are your thoughts?
Of course, he should have kept his behind at home. He testified that his father came in and said, oh, we think somebody is messing with property. You were at home. He said he was at home with his son, his mother, somebody's mama was there, and his father came in and said, I think I see the guy. Keep your behind at home and dial 911, and we wouldn't be in this situation. And then for him to intimate that somehow Aubrey was the aggressor with a straight face, like the pure unadulterated gall, to say that he was in fear. But you know what, Doc, this ain't the first time. See, this is a pattern in American history. It's making me think of a book, and it was called The Negro the Beast, and it was written at the beginning of the 20th century. I think it was 1900s, where this whole book was written. It reminds me of the movie Birth of a Nation, just laying out how God created Black people inferior, that we're just one level above the apes. See, this is the mentality that these people have. And just one more thing, can I just throw this out here?
Absolutely.
Remember the Dred Scott case of 1857? Well, Justice Tandy laid out how a lot of white folks thought then and think now, when he said they had for more than a century before been regarded as beings of inferior order and altogether unfit to associate with the white race, either in social or political relations, and so far inferior that they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. Doc, that's it. That is how the McMichaels felt, that Aubrey had no rights that they were bound to respect. Call the police, even though that could be a death sentence too, but you ain't gonna posse up in a vehicle carrying your weapons, hunting down this Black man, and now you get to say you in fear of your life. Hell to the no.
Sister, you preaching nothing but the gospel truth. And the prerequisite these killers used was a citizen's arrest statute in Georgia. And by the way, that statute has been overturned. It was a bipartisan move to get rid of that citizen's arrest law. But they were even wrong about that law. The law says that you have to see somebody in the commission of a felony.
Yes.
Right? And it has to be at the same time that you make the citizen's arrest. They were all wrong. But here's the reality of what you're saying. Not only was there a de-evaluation of the life of Mr. Arbery
Yes.
from the McMichaels and Bryan. Think about the responding officers who did not even require a legal explanation from the McMichaels as to why they killed Ahmaud Arbery. The police admitted there was no conversation about burglary, trespass, or anything else. Nothing else. They were allowed to go. Okay.
Yeah. Senior McMichael, don't forget, was a part of that police, he
That's
was
right.
in law enforcement. So that
That's right.
might be the reason.
Yeah, he worked for that DA at a time, and they were good friends. And she decided to commit one of the most atrocious acts by covering up a murder on the taxpayer dime. How comfortable can you be?
Come on.
I mean, I got some cats. Listen, Senator.
The more things change, Doc, the more they stay the same.
But I got to tell
nothing
you,
about no. Ooh, Lord Jesus, they got me calling them Black Jesus.
I'm from a place on Glenwood Road. There's some cats that I was raised with. They have a different code they live by. Now, there's a lot they'll do, but they're not about to cover up the murder for somebody. You got to think about how evil and detrimental this DA is to say, I'm willing to go on record and cover up an actual murder. That is a thug. Matt Gaetz, the guy under investigation for human child sex trafficking, has now offered the killer, Kyle Rittenhouse, a job so that your taxpayer dollars can not only pay a potential pedophile, but also a potential murderer, all in the same office. Here's a video.
He is not guilty. He deserves a not guilty verdict, and I sure hope he gets it, because you know what? Kyle Rittenhouse would probably make a pretty good congressional intern. We may reach out to him and see if he'd be interested in helping the country in addition.
Yep, you heard it right. Okay, Representative Matt Gaetz out of Florida, of course, said Wednesday that Kyle Rittenhouse, the teen on trial for killing 2 people at a Black Lives Matter protest last year in Wisconsin, might make a good congressional intern, and said his office may reach out to see if he wanted to help the country in, and I quote, additional ways. So according to the good congressman here, this killer was just helping out the country. You see how the narrative changes? A young Trayvon Martin who has Skittles and sweet tea, he's obviously a thug, right? I mean, what else is somebody going to assume if you're black and you're walking at night and you have the audacity to wear a hoodie, right? So we want to say that Kyle Rittenhouse is a child. Trayvon Martin, the victim, was an adult, according to their narrative. He is not guilty, according to Matt Gaetz. He deserves a not guilty verdict, and I sure hope he gets it. You know what? Kyle Rittenhouse will probably make a pretty good congressional intern, Gaetz told the right-wing network Newsmax. We may reach out to him and see if he'd be interested in helping the country in additional ways. Just a reminder, Rittenhouse, 18 years of age, on trial for fatally shooting 2 people, injuring a third during a protest in Kenosha, Wisconsin on August 25th, 2020, after Jacob Blake, a black man, was shot by a white Kenosha police officer. We all saw that video. Rittenhouse, who was 17 at the time, said he traveled from his home in Antioch to Kenosha. He comes from one state to the next to protect property from rioters. And by the way, just an important statutory note, it is against Wisconsin law to use deadly force to protect property, by the way. That's on the books, okay? He was armed with an AR-15 style rifle when he shot the 3 men at a demonstration. The jury began deliberations on Tuesday. The most serious charge against him is first-degree intentional homicide. Carries a mandatory sentence of life in prison. Gaetz obviously being no stranger to criminal investigations himself. The congressman is under investigation as part of a sex trafficking probe that led to the arrest and plea deal of his reported friend and wingman, Joel Greenberg, from Seminole County, Florida, who was the tax collector. And I can guarantee you this, his buddy Joel is singing like a bird. All right, Senator Turner, you know, 2 peas in the pod here.
Pretty much. I mean, white supremacy is a hell of a drug. I
Yeah.
mean, this congressman, even before the trial is done, he's innocent. He has declared that Kyle is innocent. He needs to get off. And by the way, I'm gonna give him a job too. Definitely birds of a feather. And it's quite an insult. But these people, I mean, they're so brazen with it right now. If there's any positive to this, and I mean that in a very sarcastic way, is that the congressman has let us know very clearly where he stands. So we don't have to be surprised. We can't be surprised. I'm surprised that we are surprised about anything that will come out of this man's mouth. But it is definitely an insult to the family, to the process that's going on right now, to have a congressman even flirt with the fact that he can make this man an intern. No matter what happens in this trial, he should not be an intern in Congress.
Right. And you know, if someone like Maxine Waters would have said that about a black man on trial.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Oh, my God. She's tampering with the jury. Right.
It would.
She's a criminal.
And Doc, one other point, you know, black children, to a point you were making, they treating Kyle as if he is a little boy. Certainly he was 17 at the time, far from being a little boy, not quite all the way grown by our standards in this country, but far from being a little boy. But it made me think of not just Trayvon Martin, but also Tamir Rice, who was killed on a playground here in Cleveland, Ohio. And Loman, the officer who shot him, said he thought he was 20 years old. It's not just the Lomans of the world. A lot of white people, particularly in law enforcement, but a lot of white people see and label black children older than what they really are. What does that say? Is that young black children rarely get the opportunity to truly be children. They do not get the same benefits that white children usually get, whether it's higher suspension rates at school, whether it's just doing childish things. They're always held to a higher standard. And when that happens to them in childhood, it absolutely follows them to adulthood. So there is no way that a Trayvon, that a Tamir Rice, or any other younger black child would have gotten the same benefit of the doubt that Kyle has gotten. And Kyle was actually carrying a weapon, driven there by his mama. He should have never been there in the first place.
Very well said. And you pointed it out. Story. The real narrative of America is white people who commit crimes are always given a benefit that a black person in the same situation would never receive. That is your implicit bias. That is your critical race theory in application. That is your systemic bias, all rolled into one dynamic. What if I told you that the judge in the Kyle Rittenhouse case, Judge Schroeder, decided to sing a song to Kyle Rittenhouse, the accused murderer? What if I told you that? You would say, no way in the hell. Here's the video.
Okay, you want me to play some music? And autumn leaves, and autumn leaves start to fall. Huh?
You see what's happening here, right? Judge Schroeder, who is overseeing the homicide trial of Kyle Rittenhouse, decided to break out into a song in front of jurors and the smiling defendant inside of the courtroom. Completely improper. The unusual display, according to The Independent, was conducted in front of members of the jury. Rittenhouse is facing 5 felony charges, including killing 2 people and trying to kill a 3rd. That's what it is. There's more. He also referred to black people, African Americans, as the black. Here it is.
And when the clerk, the government official, drew the name out of the tumbler, it was a black. The black, the only black. There was nothing wrong with it. It was all okay. But what do they talk about? Optics nowadays? Is that the word for things? That was a bad optic, I thought.
If you know someone, or if you're the person who refers to black people as the black, that person is racist. If you say it, you're racist. There is nobody on the planet who refers to black people as the black, and it's not racist. Judge Schroeder would go on to defend his stance on letting the people in Rittenhouse, in the Rittenhouse trial, he said it cannot be referred to as victims, but you can refer to the victims he killed as criminals. You can call them arsonists, whatever you want to. Here's some video of that.
The business about people not being identified as victims. How would you like to be put on trial for a crime? And the judge introduced the case to the jury by introducing you as the defendant and the person who is accusing you as the victim. And then throughout the trial, have all the references to the complaining witness as being the victim. Is it so difficult to just use the term complaining witness instead of prejudging what the jury is here to determine as to whether there's a victim and whether there was a crime committed? So I don't know what I'll leave that comment at that.
These are just a few of the shenanigans. Now, naturally, with a judge like this, a courtroom where people are able to report because of the transparency rule, they can talk about what's happening inside of this courtroom. The media is allowed to be there. The judge is now upset that people are telling the truth about what he's doing and how weird he is and how biased he is for Kyle Rittenhouse in this courtroom. So here's what he said about the media.
When I talked about problems with the media when this trial started, we're there in part, not fully, but in part because of grossly irresponsible handling of what comes out of this trial. I will tell you this, I'm going to think long and hard about live television of a trial again next time. I don't know. I've always been a firm believer in it because I think the people should be able to see what's going on, but when I see what's being done, it's really quite frightening. Frightening, that's the right word for it.
It's a damn shame. It's a damn shame. Today, that same judge decided to ban MSNBC from the entire courtroom. This is the same judge that decided to sing Autumn Leaves to make the defendant smile. Ladies and gentlemen, this gives you a close example, a very direct point of view as it relates to judicial authority in America. If you got a good judge, a judge that actually believes in the law, is fair, judicious, intentional about probative versus prejudicial rulings, then you may have a fair case. But when we talk about criminal justice reform, we cannot leave out the reality of the judiciary and how judges play a massively powerful role in our system of justice.
Let me see your driver's license. Open the door, dude.
Over in the secondary, sir?
Pull over on the side so we can do a vehicle inspection right over
For
there.
what reason?
Why are you scared of the law?
I'm not scared of the law.
Where are you hiding from? You scared of the dark?
Maybe.
Huh?
I might be.
I believe you are. Grown man scared of the dark, that sounds kind of funny to me.
Welcome back to the Lackluster channel. Today's story was submitted by Ashton of the Knowledge is Power channel. I recently covered another incident featuring Ashton.
I got a couple of questions for you.
Okay, I'm not going to answer any of them.
Okay, so do you just want to go to jail?
No.
Have you been drinking tonight?
I'm not going to answer any of your questions.
Okay. Are you willing to do some field sobriety evaluations?
Absolutely not. Most people fail those sober.
People spend entirely too much time online, and they are roadside attorneys.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman, joined by Democracy Now! Co-host Nermeen Sheikh. Hi, Nermeen.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
Well, jurors in Charlottesville, Virginia, are hearing closing arguments today in the civil trial that seeks to hold white supremacists accountable for organizing the deadly Unite the Right rally in 2017 and conspiring to commit racially motivated violence. Several hundred white supremacists marched with tiki torches at the time across the University of Virginia, chanting, "You will not replace us, Jews will not replace us, and white lives matter." The next day, self-described neo-Nazi James Alex Fields slammed his car into a crowd of anti-racist counter-protesters, killing Heather Heyer and injuring dozens more. He was sentenced to life in prison for murder and hate crimes and lost an appeal this week. Two of the white supremacists have been defending themselves in the courtroom, Richard Spencer and Christopher Cantwell. They took the stand Tuesday and tried unsuccessfully to have the judge dismiss the case for lack of evidence, even as they used racial slurs during the trial. When Cantwell cross-examined one of the witnesses, Holocaust historian Deborah Lipstadt, he asked her, quote, "There's no such thing as an innocent anti-Semitic joke?" After today's closing arguments, jurors are expected to begin deliberations Friday. For more, we're joined by Dahlia Lithwick, Slate.com's senior editor and senior legal correspondent. She's been covering the trial, lived in Charlottesville during the Unite the Right rally. Her recent piece is headlined, "Why the Nazis Are Treating Their Trial in Charlottesville Like a Joke." Dahlia, welcome back to Democracy Now! We're in this key moment of three, one might argue, white supremacist trials. This one is a civil one. You've got Rittenhouse, and then you've got the case of the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. But we're going to start with Charlottesville. Talk about the uniqueness of this trial, that it's civil, and what has been said, and the fights between the white supremacists who are representing themselves.
One of the things that is really striking about this trial is the extent to which we all thought that the defendants were going to be somewhat organized. They were going to present a kind of coherent front. They were going to at least attempt to prove to the world that what they did was innocent. What we've seen instead is just chaos. The plaintiff's case was airtight, so much documentary evidence, reams and reams of testimony, compelling testimony. And then when the defense kind of got up to try to present its case at the beginning of this week, it was infighting, catfighting. At one point, Richard Spencer was questioning Jason Kessler, the local organizer, about why he thought he was a psycho. As you said, the N-word was being dropped. Chris Cantwell, the so-called crying Nazi, was literally standing up and replaying video of himself assaulting people. And so one of the real lessons of this trial to me is that when given 4 years to prepare a defense, these entities and people, all they could come up with was performance art, showmanship, and a little bit of what you heard about Paul Gosar. Just, this is a joke. It's fun. This was hilarious. Don't you agree?
Dahlia, you mentioned the plaintiffs, their testimony. What most struck you about what they said?
I think it's hard not to be moved by the trauma. You had one plaintiff after another, some of whom sustained life-changing injuries, some of whom have sustained the kind of post-traumatic stress that has rendered them almost incapacitated, really unbelievably tragic trauma. And when you heard them talk about what they sustained that day, how it has informed and affected their lives and really made them terrified, and then to see them being cross-examined again by the Chris Cantwells of the world, the Richard Spencers of the world, trying to imply that they were part of some nefarious Antifa plot and that this was a trap laid by anti-fascists in order to discredit the white supremacist movement. I think the thing that has struck me most is just the discordance, again, between the genuine life-altering suffering of the plaintiffs and the sense that this is just kind of a comedy tour, that it is neither serious nor sober nor warranting of action on the part of the defendants.
Dahlia, could you explain who is Richard Spencer and who is Cantwell?
Well, Richard Spencer rose to fame shortly after Donald Trump was elected. He was, for a moment, the poster boy of the freshly scrubbed, preppy, new face of white supremacy. He's credited with inventing the term alt-right, which was supposed to be freshly scrubbed Nazi. And you may remember right after the election, he led a sort of victory party where people gave the Nazi salute and shouted Nazi slogans. That's Richard Spencer. I should note he's fallen from grace. He's now representing himself. His wife left him with allegations of terrific abuse, and he's penniless. Chris Cantwell, I think, rose to fame around the same time as a shock jock, as an entertainer. He mentions every opportunity that he can in this trial that he has a entertainment product, this podcast, that he's just a funny guy who happened to show up in Charlottesville armed, and who, after he was pepper sprayed as part of the violence, there was a video of him that went viral of him sobbing and crying about turning himself into the police. So I think, in a sense, both of them are iterations of this face of what tried to be kind of cool, hip, Proud Boy era, funny, entertaining Nazis who a little bit got caught up in their own rhetoric and really failed utterly to take responsibility for the roles they played in leading this movement and possibly, well, the jury will tell us, leading to some of the violence that day.
Dalia, what do you think the broader significance of this case are, and also the closing arguments as they're set to begin today? What are you watching out for?
So one of the things I want to really note is that this trial was not televised. In order to listen in, you have to call a 1-800 number that takes you into the courthouse. So it actually has been a really fascinating study in how to cover Nazism without amplifying it. Certainly some of the defendants who've been deplatformed have been going on one another's podcasts. But one of the things that's been really striking is the extent to which it has contained some of the worst rhetoric, the dropping of the N-word, the joking with one another about which Holocaust jokes are funny. All of that has been kind of hived off from public view. And I think, in a sense, for me, one of the lessons of this is how you can have accountability. And again, it will be left to the jury starting this afternoon when they begin to deliberate if they want to have accountability. But to have accountability without amplifying the really hateful, hurtful message, I think it's been a really powerful lesson how you do that, how you don't, in some sense, give attention to the worst elements of this. In terms of the closing statements, I think one of the things that I've found really interesting in the last 2 days is the extent to which the defendants simply don't understand conspiracy law. There was an attempt on Tuesday. They wanted the case dismissed. Richard Spencer and Chris Cantwell said to the judge, we have nothing to do. There was no agreement. There's no evidence that we were in a conspiracy. And Judge Moon, who's this 84-year-old, very Southern gentleman who's been really unfailingly fair to both sides, basically said, you don't understand anything about conspiracy law, and walked them through the evidence and more or less said that alone could lead the jury to find conspiracy. So I think whether the defendants fully understand the law and fully understand the extent to which they're on the hook is going to be the thing that I'm going to look for in the closing.
Very quickly, before we move on to the Rittenhouse homicide trial, the murder trial, explain how this case is different. They are not on trial, for example, for killing Heather Heyer, or this is a civil trial. They're not going to go to jail. So what is the point? Who are the plaintiffs that brought this?
The plaintiffs were 9 people who were injured in the events of August 11th and 12th in Charlottesville. And it's a civil trial in some sense because the Trump Justice Department didn't stand up and didn't in any way attempt to bring to justice the folks who were involved in organizing and performing this rally. And so I think that the plaintiffs in this case, and they're led by really masterful attorneys, Robbie Kaplan and Karen Dunn and their teams, what they essentially said was, we will be the stand-in for the DOJ. We will bring a civil rights action that says, if you based on racial animus, deprive people of their civil rights. This is rooted in the KKK Act, 150-year-old statute. We will effectuate your rights in a civil trial.
I want to ask you about the homicide trial of the white teen gunman Kyle Rittenhouse, where jury deliberations have entered a third day. Judge Bruce Schroeder has yet to rule on 2 mistrial requests from the defense, but said he may still do so. He said he could rule on this even after a verdict is rendered. So if there was a guilty verdict, he could move to vacate it. Dahlia Lithwick, you are Slate's senior legal correspondent, and have another piece out headlined, "When Everything is Self-Defense and Everyone Gets a Gun." It seems to me that could apply as much to the Arbery murder trial, where Travis McMichael, the son of the former police officer, and his father, and the other man, Brian, are also on trial for murdering, in this case, Ahmaud Arbery, and they're contending self-defense. But talk about Rittenhouse and self-defense.
I think you made this point in your lead-in, Amy, that we have now reached a moment where people are claiming self-defense when they bring their own weapon, in Rittenhouse's case, across state lines, a weapon he was not legally entitled to own. They bring their weapon into a public setting, and then they claim self-defense because they feel that their weapon was going to be used against them. And you cited the Arbery case for that. But Rittenhouse, too, is laying claim to this idea that he was in danger and entitled to shoot all these people in the span of 120 seconds because they were going to wrest his rifle, his weapon from him, and they were going to kill him with it. And the point I was trying to make, and I think this is really connected to the U.S. Supreme Court hearing oral argument just a few weeks ago in a case that would probably strike down New York's licensing law, is that if everybody has a weapon and everybody feels that their weapon can be used against them and then forward a self-defense claim, everybody will be reasonable. It is entirely reasonable in a world where everybody is armed and everybody thinks that they're vulnerable because someone else will shoot them with their own gun, that everyone will shoot first. It doesn't seem like a civil society. It seems like the OK Corral to me. And really, in a deep, deep sense, the Rittenhouse jurors have to confront the fact that it may have been perfectly reasonable for him to feel that he was under threat because his own weapon could be used against him. But what does that say about a world in which everyone will use that as a claim of self-defense?
Tamir Rice was shot dead in 2 seconds in Ohio. Cops pulled up. They didn't ask him any questions. They assumed his toy gun was a real gun, and without any notice at all, shot him dead. How much notice can you give in 2 seconds? Now, I'm going to show you the video in a second, but first, I have news on it. That's why we're bringing this up. A grand jury in Ohio has decided not to press any charges against the 2 officers involved, Frank Garmbach or Timothy Lohman, who fatally shot Rice in the video you're about to see. So there's Tamir Rice. He's a 12-year-old at a park. The cops pull straight up to him. They're not on the street. They're not inquiring. They get out of the car, shoot him dead. 2 seconds. Now they claim, well, I couldn't tell, so better safe than sorry. Just murder the 12-year-old and figure things out later. Ask questions later. It's black. Now, they don't say that. No, there was a real danger. There was a real, oh my God, I didn't know. It looked like something that was a gun. And the 911 operator heard that it was a toy gun, but didn't relay that to me. So I assumed I should shoot that black person dead just in case he might ever harm me. Now, wait a minute. If I was worried about being harmed, why didn't I pull up on the street, maybe take out my gun because I thought it was a real gun and say, hey, hands up, freeze, you're under arrest. Throw the gun down. Are you a kid? What is that? What are you holding? Maybe I wait for backup. No, I drive right up to him and shoot him dead. I got him, right? And what happened? Free to go. Why? In this case, the prosecutors so clearly through the grand jury investigation, they almost brag about it. Now, again, I was a prosecutor very briefly for 2 summers as an intern when I was in law school. But one thing I knew as a prosecutor, even working there briefly, was that the old saying, you can indict a ham sandwich if you want. Meaning you can indict anything. Defense cannot show up to grand jury investigations. The prosecutor has complete discretion. But these prosecutors all across the country, and definitely in this specific case, don't want to indict the cops. They're buddies with the cops. They work with the cops all the time. They love the cops. They want the cops to go scot-free. They're going to work with them tomorrow. Of course they're on the cops' side. So they do the exact opposite. Just like in Ferguson, they present witnesses on behalf of the cops, not against the cops, in a grand jury proceeding. That's, except for the case of cops, unheard of, unheard of. If a citizen had shot a cop, you think a prosecutor is going to go to grand jury and be like, now I can present any evidence I like, but I'm going to show you why you shouldn't convict this cop killer. You think they might do that at a grand jury? They're not going to do that at a grand jury hearing. If it's a cop who got shot, anybody else who got shot, if a cop does a shooting of a black person, hey, let's go. Wipe it under the rug. Who cares? Now let me give you details. The Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office released investigations. This is before they go to the grand jury. Released investigations concluding the shooting was justified. The prosecutor's office, before going to prosecute, says shooting's definitely justified. Oh, thank you for not being biased. That's really appreciated. Those are not the defense. That's the prosecution. Okay, McKindy, who is the prosecutor here in Ohio, in Cuyahoga County, explained that he recommended no charges, too, after reviewing the case, calling it a perfect storm of human error that showed no criminal conduct by the police. Where the hell's the justice, man? Well, then why are you pretending to be the prosecutor? If you say, I'm positive the cops aren't guilty, and I'm going to try to prove that to a grand jury instead of doing my job, well, then recuse yourself. Give it over to some other independent authority. You can't just say, I declare the cops to be innocent, and then I will pretend to try them to see if a grand jury will indict them. You see, we're all in on it. It's so funny when we kill 12-year-olds and then brag about how we're going to get away with it. McKindy also said it would have been, quote, unreasonable to make an officer wait to see if a gun that someone was drawing from their pocket was real or a toy. So he thinks the actions of the cops are perfectly reasonable. In fact, if you'd asked him to do anything else, it would have been unreasonable. So now you know, black citizens of Ohio, but honestly, all citizens of Ohio, all 12-year-olds of Ohio, all parents in Ohio, you should know, cops find it perfectly reasonable to pull up to your 12-year-old and shoot him dead in 2 seconds flat. They don't think it's reasonable to ask questions. They don't think it's reasonable to park, I don't know, 100 feet away, 20 feet away, 10 feet away. No, that's not reasonable. That would be unreasonable to ask them to do that. You're on notice now. They can shoot your kids dead, and there's not a goddamn thing you're going to do about it, because the prosecutor's going to come in and go, here, I am throwing the case. I will not do my job. I will do the opposite and make sure there is no justice. And you're on notice in Ohio. Any of your kids can get killed in 2 seconds flat, no questions asked, and the authorities will find it eminently reasonable. You saw that video? You thought that was reasonable? All these guys, the cops, the prosecutors, all in that area. No, yeah. Anybody who disagrees, the cops threatened athletes in Cleveland who disagreed that perhaps they wouldn't get protection. Well, if this is the kind of protection you're talking about, I don't want it. I don't want any part of it. Now, you can understand why the family is upset. More evidence that they presented that the prosecutors threw the case is they came out and put witnesses on the stand that exonerated what the cops did. Again, that is the exact opposite of the purpose of a grand jury proceeding. Do you want to try? You know, grand jury, you don't convict a person. It's just a proceeding to see if he's going to go to trial so you can see all the evidence. That's where the defense comes in and says, hey, no, you shouldn't convict him. You need reasonable doubt, and we have a real case, and we find out what happened. The grand jury is, hey, do you have anything to bring this guy to trial? You can indict, like I said, almost anything or anybody in the country if you want to. The prosecutor has full discretion. In his discretion, instead of indicting him, he says, oh, here's a wonderful witness who says the cops had to do it. It was so reasonable. Now, if you're in the jury, what are you going to think? The prosecutor's telling me not to indict. He's telling me over and over again not to do it. Here are more evidence. The family said, first of all, they accused the prosecutor of, quote, abusing and manipulating the grand jury process to orchestrate a vote against indictment. And by the way, you understand why they go to a grand jury? So they can say, I didn't say not to indict. I didn't make that decision. I asked the grand jury, and the grand jury said I shouldn't. That's a jury of his peers. They said I shouldn't indict. Oh, well, I threw the case. Yeah, very clever, very clever. So again, attorney for the family of Tamir Rice says, Prosecutor McGinty allowed the police officers to take the oath and read prepared statements to the grand jury without answering any questions on cross-examination. Even though it is black letter law that taking the stand waives the Fifth Amendment right to be silent, the prosecutor did not seek a court order compelling the officers to answer questions or holding the officers in contempt if they continued to refuse. The way Prosecutor McGinty has mishandled the grand jury process has compounded the grief of this family. The idea that a prosecutor would allow someone who's accused of weighty matters here, and we're talking about homicide, that's the accusation. That's what we're seeing if we're going to have a trial over. The idea that he would allow the defendant to get up and say anything they want and not cross-examine them. Preposterous. They would never, ever, ever do that for anyone who wasn't a cop. But the cops are above the law, apparently, certainly in Cuyahoga County, certainly in Ohio. Watch out. If you live in Ohio, you're just driving through Ohio. Watch out. It's open season on you and your kids. And the prosecutors aren't going to do a damn thing about it. At what point would it have been reasonable to indict? If they shot Tamir Rice within 1 second? They shot him in 2 seconds. At what point do you say, hey, perhaps they acted unreasonably? Maybe it's not murder one, but maybe it's negligent homicide. Maybe, just maybe, they shouldn't have killed a kid in 2 seconds flat. You think you would have had a different conclusion if it was 1 second? No. There is no amount of time where apparently in Ohio, at least in this county, you can't shoot a 12-year-old and get away with it. They will find your actions reasonable almost no matter what. I don't know. They're not shooting a lot of 12-year-old whites, and I hope to God they don't. But you think they won't? They're above the law. They can shoot anybody they like. When they came for the blacks, what did you do? When they came for the Mexicans, what did you do? And the mentally disabled get shot more than anybody else in this country. When they came for them, the cops shot them because, it's a hassle to arrest this guy. Let's just murder him and move on with our lives. What did you do? So when they come for you and they come for your family, don't be surprised, because if you live in this area, you sanctioned it. You allow this prosecutor to destroy the law, destroy justice, and say, well, I don't know, I guess he was under some sort of threat. So the next time somebody else is killed in 2 seconds, and it might be someone you know or part of your family, don't complain. You thought it was great when it happened to other people. If you don't think it's great, then do something about it. Should McGinty be fired? At a minimum. At a minimum. What kind of negligence is this on the actions of a so-called prosecutor? Of course he should be fired. Is there going to be any real justice? The only question is if federal prosecutors can do anything about this. But once it goes federal, it is much, much harder to prove, and they know it. That's why they snicker in their corners about getting away with it. Oh, they had to do it. It was so reasonable to kill that kid in 2 seconds. Reasonable my ass. They say black people in this country are angry. They're not nearly angry enough. Nobody should ever take the law into their own hands. You shouldn't become the monsters you fight against. Unfortunately, in this case, the cops, the prosecutors are those monsters.